Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to Behind the Mission, our monthly series here where we talk about what it takes and what it's like to work in international development. I'm your host, Srimati Sridhar, and I'm looking forward to guiding you through today's episode as we talk about race and inclusion. Today's episode is also a nod to Black History Month, which is celebrated in the United States and runs through all of February. For the World Bank Group, race is a key component to diversity and inclusion. So to learn more about what the institution is doing on the race agenda and to also hear some personal experiences, I'm delighted to be joined by Daryl Lucas, who's the Director of HR Client Services, and Nadine Chapman, who's the Manager of Mediation Services. Before we get into our conversation with Daryl and Nadine, I do want to remind folks to take advantage of the live chat section of today's episode, where we do have colleagues working behind the scenes to answer as many of your questions as possible. And as always, you can always follow us along online using the hashtag BehindTheMissionWBG. With that, let's get our conversation going. Daryl, Nadine, it's great to have you both today. Thanks so much for joining me. So let's dive in and start talking about what the World Bank Group is doing around race and inclusion. I mentioned this briefly in my introduction, but for the institution, race is a key component to our diversity, equity, and also inclusion agenda. So how would you say that the bank group has been addressing this issue? And what's been your personal experience? Daryl, let me start with you, and feel free to also introduce yourself before you answer the question.
Sure. Thanks, Sri. My name is Daryl Lucas. I'm the Director of Client Services for the World Bank. And look, I think the institution has done several things. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is it starts with walking the talk and reiterating its commitment to diversity and inclusion, and seeing that there are high-profile roles across the institution, whether it's our General Counsel, the Managing Director of IFC, or Senior Vice President at MEGA, which is one of the institutions across the World Bank Group, having diverse figures across the organization that we can look up to who participate with us as part of the diversity and inclusion agenda, I think is a very strong signal to all of us. But at the working level, we have embarked on a very tremendous campaign with the Racism Task Force, which has brought staff across the World Bank Group to come together and really have bottom-up solutions and ideas to help shape and inform ways that we can be even more attentive to diversity and inclusion at the World Group. I mean, racism exists everywhere, including at the World Bank Group. And so to have a 360-degree perspective of how and where changes can be made in real time so that people feel welcome to work at the institution is paramount.
Really is. Thank you so much, Daryl. Nadine, let me now turn over to you. And similar to Daryl, please feel free to give us a brief introduction of yourself before you answer the question.
Hi, Shri. It is wonderful to be here, and I'm very excited to talk about this topic, which is very dear to my heart. And to Daryl's point, I am the Manager of Mediation Services. I joined the World Bank 22 years ago, which is hard to believe. So I really have been part of the institution for a very long time. And one thing I'm very proud to say to you is that racism at the World Bank and the World Bank's dedication to address the issue of racism is not new. It did not start with the murder of George Floyd. It's something that the institution has been working on for many years. I'm very proud to say that I have seen the Diversity and Inclusion Office that was founded many years ago that has been addressing these issues for a long time. There are also many affinity groups, of which I've been part of, that help to bring to the attention of senior management issues and concerns affecting staff of African descent. Also, we have regularly as an institution been open to and hosted numerous activities, including Community Connections, which is an annual campaign that we have each year where we donate millions of dollars literally to many organizations, many of which are based in the Washington, D.C. area, that are made up of organizations that serve people who are of African descent and other non-included groups. So I'm very proud to say that the World Bank has always been very active. This is nothing new for the institution.
Thanks, Nadine. You've both given us some really good examples of what we've been doing as an institution. Now that we have that better understanding of what the World Bank Group has been doing to support the race agenda, let's talk about specific initiatives that the institution has been implementing to help attract African American professionals. Have you found them successful? Nadine, let me start this question with you.
Thank you for asking that, Shri. I will say that there have been numerous initiatives. One initiative that I'm aware of is in the Human Resources Vice Presidency. There have been targeted recruitments to attract people of African descent. And that recruitment effort has actually resulted in the hiring of many staff, not only in the World Bank, but in IFC, who are of African descent. Personally, I'm very proud to and happy to share with you that there is a program called the Howard University Law School World Bank Group Experiential ADR Program, which I co-founded with the director of the ADR program at Howard University Law School. That program is now in its 7th year, and we have had over 60 third-year law students from Howard University work in the World Bank Group for an entire year. And our goal with that is to not only expose the institution to a population that normally does not have access to the institution, but also to ideally build a future pipeline. So those are just merely 2 examples of many of programs that I personally have seen that have impacted not only the participants, but also the institution.
Thanks so much, Nadine. Daryl, what about you? What initiatives have you found successful?
Thank you very much. It's interesting. I think the outreach that we conduct on an ongoing basis, it has been proven to be very successful, primarily because particularly in the Washington, D.C. area where the World Bank is headquartered, we often make the assumption that people know what the World Bank does. And having senior managers go out and not only partner with universities and HBCUs or historically Black colleges and universities, but spend an hour or 45 minutes doing a presentation or a discussion on what it really means in terms of how we play our role in poverty alleviation and boosting shared prosperity has proven helpful. It's allowed graduate students, for example, to start to establish networks to learn more about the organization and become aware of opportunities that become available for them, whether they be internships or entry-level positions. Additionally, the high school internship program is one that I feel is very successful because, again, in our own backyard, Washington, D.C. is an extremely diverse city, and the ability to get young people, even before they finished high school, to spend their summer working at the World Bank Group and understanding what we do is a great primer in helping to direct what they do in undergrad and then ultimately in grad school in some instances. And so I think both of those have proven to be very successful. And then lastly, I think the formal and informal mentoring systems that are established around the World Bank. It's a large organization to some, and you may feel like you're the only one there that has your circumstances. And having a mentor or a coach or someone to help guide you is a way to start building those connections. And then you realize that one, you're not alone, and you realize that people are very much interested in your success.
Thanks, Daryl. A lot of really good programs and also opportunities. So I hope viewers jot those down. Now I want to ask you both, let's pivot a bit to talk about how the organization as a whole can help better promote this culture of inclusion. What role do you think we as staff have to play in supporting and also sustaining inclusion? Is there anything we should be more mindful or more aware of? Daryl, let me start with you.
I think one of the things, and I'll just use my personal experience of having been at the World Bank for almost 15 years, I think stopping short of making assumptions about things and really engaging people. What we bring to the table is a diverse global population. And many times you are going to come in contact with someone who may not know a lot about your background, your experiences. And so there's an opportunity, one, to learn a tremendous amount about others and really enrich yourself. But there's also that risk that if you just stop short of assumptions, you may assume that the way people engage you is not necessarily welcoming or inclusive. And so we always stress, get to know people, understand that things aren't the same everywhere. But as we start to grow and learn from each other, there really is this richness that you get at the World Bank Group that I don't see anywhere else.
That's certainly very true. Nadine, what would you have to say about this?
Well, I actually believe that a lot starts with yourself. It really starts with self-awareness, being aware of who you are, being aware of, as Daryl alluded to, what your assumptions are, or what your blind spots are. Everybody has them. Everybody has a blind spot. We all make assumptions. But one thing that I really encourage everyone to do is, regardless of their level, to get involved. To not wait for leadership. I believe that we all are leaders, regardless of what our work level is. And I believe that we're all capable of identifying gaps that exist within the current environment. And we also have the ability to change the culture or the environment. So I encourage enlightenment, being enlightened about who you are, but also moving, doing something, looking to see what impact you can have to make the environment more inclusive or better for everyone.
So never assume and get involved is what I'm hearing from you both there. Daryl, Nadine, before we continue our conversation, I did want to acknowledge our online audience. Now, we share these episodes across our social channels, and we always get questions coming in from folks on how they can apply, what they can do to stand out. So in the spirit of that, I wanted to ask a couple of job-specific questions to you both. The first is, what do you think helps applicants stand out, whether it's on a resume or even in person for a job interview? Who wants to take this one first?
I don't mind jumping in. I'm looking at Daryl. I don't mind jumping in. I was just on a selection panel, so it's very timely. I do think most of all is to be authentic, to be yourself, to make sure that when you apply for a position, first of all, that you're qualified for it, not to just throw your hat in the ring because you want to work at the World Bank. So to do some homework before you submit the application. Make sure that when you look at the selection criteria, that you actually meet the criteria. And if you meet the criteria, only then to apply. I also think it's very important when you submit your application to realize that it's very important for us to know who you are, what is your value proposition, what is it that you bring to the table, what skills do you have, and what makes you unique. And don't underestimate your uniqueness or your own brand.
I love that. Daryl, what are your tips?
I couldn't agree more with Nadine. Look, I think that you really have to thread the needle in really highlighting who you are and your unique attributes. But at the same time, you have to resonate with the job. Sometimes just taking a victory lap on your credentials and all your accomplishments, if they really don't resonate with how you could be successful in the job, is not as effective as simply standing out amongst all the other applicants, but really showing how you can deliver at the bank or in the specific job you're applying for. I think that's key. And I think it's a subtle step that people often miss.
Thanks, Daryl. This next question, I love this question. It's all about rejection. We've all faced this at some point in our professional career. You apply for a job, you don't get it, or you apply, but you just never seem to hear back. You just can't get the job that you want. How do you overcome this feeling of rejection and still kind of have that fire in you, so to say, to keep trying elsewhere? Maybe, do you guys have an example of a time that you overcame rejection in your own professional career? Daryl, let me turn to you first.
Sure. I'll answer the second question first. We don't have enough time to count the number of rejections I've experienced in applying for jobs. But I think it simply comes down to your mental GPS. If you're looking to enrich your career, if you're looking to start your career, or if you're looking to change your career, if you do that as an action out of aspiration, you're trying to get somewhere. If you're doing that out of desperation, you may find yourself falling into things that you're not that passionate for. You may not do the best interview. You may not even realize it. You may do things on autopilot. So really invest the time in one, making sure that this is what you want to do. And then two, making sure that you stand out amongst anybody else that wants to compete with you forward. And if it doesn't go your way, feel free to ask for feedback. It's not a token gesture if you don't get something and someone sends you a rejection letter. Follow up, find out what maybe you could have done more of, or what maybe you can do to expand your horizon. Or if anything, it's a way to stay on the radar screen of others as future opportunities may arise.
That's really good. That's a really good tip. I don't think a lot of people know or feel comfortable doing that. And I think it is important to reach out right after you hear back. Nadine, what are your thoughts on this?
I know what I'm going to share is a bit counterintuitive, but I do believe one of my favorite authors is Miguel Ruiz, and one of his 4 principles is don't take anything personal. And when you're rejected, it is very natural to take it very personally. And to also get to actually feel not only disappointed, but discouraged. So I think it's very important to, when you do get that rejection, and yes, I have been rejected at work many times, to see it as a learning opportunity, to kind of look at, well, what did I take away from that? What I took away from it was I had an opportunity to practice my interviewing skills. I had an opportunity to get in front of people who I would not have ordinarily been able to get in front of. And as Daryl said, also asking for feedback. And not burning bridges. I've seen for myself an egregious case where an individual was so angry that they totally burned their bridges with the World Bank Group, and you don't want to do that. So see it as a learning opportunity, see it as a stepping stone, and I actually believe if it's the right job, you will get it.
That is so true. Daryl, Nadine, thanks for taking the time to answer a couple of those questions. They're always very popular, so it's good to take it's good to get both of your take on it. But let's now get back to our conversation, and I want to touch now on this concept of racial minority. Because the World Bank Group is global, this concept of identifying as a racial minority, it means something different in each country. What does it mean to you as an African-American working at the World Bank? Nadine, let me start with you.
Well, for me, being a racial minority, it goes into the numbers. So to me, what it means to me is when I don't see people that look like me in the environment that I'm in. So it's a statistic, even though I don't like numbers. So if you look in the setting and you don't see yourself reflected, that means you're a minority. Also, if I don't see myself reflected in the culture, in the artifacts of the institution, that's also an indication of being of a minority status. So to me, it's about the numbers, how many of us are there, and also whether our culture is included. I do believe the World Bank has made a lot of effort in this area. It still has more work to do, like most organizations, but that's how I define it in an organizational perspective.
Thank you, Nadine. And Daryl, what does racial minority mean to you?
For me, it means it's the experience that I've lived my whole life and I've brought with me to the World Bank, and in many ways, they parallel each other. So, as Nadine mentioned, it's feeling like the only one or one of very few in a large sea, feeling that your culture or your experience is not necessarily part of the mainstream lexicon. And at work, it's the same thing. If you think about the lineage of the World Bank and its establishment, we have lots of art around our buildings. You see pictures of what the place looked like 70 years ago, 60 years ago, 50 years ago. And you see that parallel, that things that I've experienced in my personal life in the United States, for example, you've seen that change happening at the World Bank Group as well. And so for me, they go hand in glove, but it is exactly that feeling of feeling that your experience and your attributes and your culture is not necessarily part of the mainstream or the structure itself.
Right. It really feels like it's a much more kind of conscious awareness of who you are, right? Yeah. Now, we touched a bit earlier on the subject of racial discrimination when talking about the race agenda. How would you say the World Bank Group has worked to address all other forms of discrimination? Daryl, let me start with you.
I think I would need a little bit of time to go through the list of mechanisms that we have formally and informally, but I think it starts with the premise of the position. The position of the organization is very clear, that it stands against all forms of discrimination and harassment. And to support staff, there are light ways for staff to feel protected and safe and to anonymously report issues. There are also formal mechanisms. And there are also task forces at the highest levels of the organization that really look at how the culture of the organization needs to be rewired to make sure that it's ring-fenced even stronger against forms of discrimination. But it really starts with building the culture and maintaining this dialogue with staff that it's safe to speak up. I mentioned earlier about this being a global context, and culturally, not everybody feels comfortable speaking up when things happen. Not everybody feels safe or protected raising issues to either their manager or to our internal justice system. And what we've simply encouraged is we will keep doubling down on making sure that those mechanisms are available for staff to feel protected, number one, and then two, to have a strong and swift follow-up and accountability on actions that do happen. But it runs across the gamut, whether it's sexual harassment, racial discrimination, retaliation, and other forms of discrimination and harassment.
Thanks so much, Daryl. And what are your thoughts on this, Nadine?
Well, one thing that I'm very happy and that I've seen at the World Bank is that there are many very active groups, which I'm part of several, that are, for example, the World Bank has a very active women's network, as well as IFC, our private sector part of the World Bank group. We also have several disability working groups. We also have, for groups that are not represented in general, they have a platform within the World Bank group. And they also have a lot of participation in our staff association, which is more like our union. So the staff association actively represents staff, and it also ensures that all staff are protected, regardless of what affinity group or what racial group, ethnic group, or even sexual orientation they have. So I believe that we've seen that. I am part of the internal justice services of the World Bank Group, and we have made a conscious effort to try our best to reach staff and to assure them that if they use our services, that they can use it without any retribution or retaliation. But as Daryl has alluded, we're still working on that within the organization.
Thanks, Nadine. We're at the last question of our episode today. And before I let the both of you go, I would love to hear from you. What would be your piece of advice for professionals that want to work with us here at the World Bank Group? And, maybe deriving from your own personal experiences, what's helped you get to where you are today? Nadine, let me start with you.
Well, for me, what has helped me is that I know what my strengths are and I know what my weaknesses are. So I believe having a very strong sense of who you are, the good, the bad, and the ugly is very important. None of us are perfect. None of us, there's a lot of us think we're great at everything, but we're not. So I'm very realistic in my abilities. And I actually have taken inventory at different times in my career as to what I can do and where I can make the most impact. And I have actually strategically networked with individuals who can mentor me to help me get to the next step. Not only that, but I've also mentored other people. So to me, it's not just upward trajectory. I've learned that my career has actually blossomed through lateral movements. So I think a lot of success has to do with first knowing who you are, building on your strengths, and also networking. I think relationships are key in any job. It's very important that you not lose sight of individuals.
Thank you so much, Nadine. And finally, Daryl, what is your piece of advice?
To Nadine's point, I think self-awareness and learning about yourself is key. And learning as much as you can about the place you want to work is key. There's all sorts of resources that people can take advantage of to learn about the World Bank, for example. But it's important to form your own opinion of the organization and how you can contribute. And then even as you come into the organization, to Nadine's point, making sure that it's not a destination, it is the arrival, because you reboot. As soon as you do that again, you should still continue learning about yourself. You should still continue talking to people and making sure that you have an informed view of things. And I think the bank does have a tremendous support system. Nadine alluded to this. I mean, you can join affinity groups. I'm a member of the African American Association. We have the African Descent Alliance, for example. There's the Women's Network that Nadine mentioned. But it's sort of a continuous process of how you got to the organization, in a way, should also be how you continue to grow and thrive in the organization. Don't stop by getting in the door. Continue that process of self-awareness and self-growth, as well as expanding your network and learning more about the organization.
Well, on that inspiring note, I want to thank you and Nadine for joining me here today on Behind the Mission, and really telling me more about yourselves, but also what the World Bank Group has been doing around race and inclusion as we celebrate Black History Month. It's really been a pleasure speaking with you both, and I hope that the audience is walking away with a much better understanding around what the institution is doing on this important agenda. So for folks that tuned in online, if you joined our conversation late, or you simply want to watch it back again at a later time, a replay will be available on our World Bank LinkedIn channel, as well as on World Bank Live. That's live.worldbank.org, where you can also catch up on other live series and events. For the latest career openings, be sure to visit our job site and stay connected to us. Give us a follow. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm Srimati Sridhar. Thanks again so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.